that we do not get to, we can follow up with those afterwards. We'll also be sending a follow-up survey after this webinar. So with our first poll, we want to get an idea of the audience and who's in the room. So I will start the poll now. And the first question is just what best describes you? And then the second question is, if you are a full-time or seasonal resident, where in Tahoe is your home located? So I'll give people a minute to do that. If you are calling in just by the phone, I do not know if there is a way to have you submit those, so I do apologize if anyone is calling in on the phone. So it looks like the majority of folks that are on the webinar today are either full-time or seasonal residents in Tahoe. We have some visitors and some other, and it's fairly well distributed between the West Shore, South Lake Tahoe, and a little bit on the North Shore. It seems like a couple of votes are still trickling in, but I'm glad to see such a variety of people interested in learning more. So why are we doing a corridor plan for the State Route 89 corridor? We can share those polling results. Obviously, when you think about the West Shore of Lake Tahoe, you think about Emerald Bay, the iconic recreation and historic locations such as Camp Richardson. But on the other side, we also see, next slide, please. All of the issues and challenges that can come with the natural beauty. This is a typical summer day through Emerald Bay that I'm sure most of the people on this webinar are very familiar with. The congestion leads to safety issues, as you can see those folks walking in the middle of the road. It leads to environmental degradation. When people are parking on dirt, like the van on the left, that dirt is getting into, that dirt is going into the lake and harming our famous Lake Clarity. It also impacts the visitor experience. It's not fun for anyone to be stuck in that congestion, and then it impacts those residents that live on the West Shore and people that have to commute along that corridor for business. Next slide. So what is corridor planning? Corridor planning is a framework to look at the Tahoe Basin in 6 unique areas that you can see on this map. The State Route 89 corridor plan starts in the South Shore at Westway and goes north to the El Dorado County Placer County line at Tahoma, and again includes some of those iconic recreation sites such as Emerald Bay. This approach really takes a multi-benefit bundled approach. So we're not just looking at the transportation system. We're not just looking at recreation. We're looking at how all of those can work together to meet our goals. We've seen success of this corridor planning framework on State Route 28 with the opening of the Sand Harbor to Incline Village bike path. Just last year, that path in its first year had over 250,000 users and will soon continue from Sand Harbor all the way to Spooner Summit. We're building on that framework in the SR 89 corridor in order to enhance the transportation and recreation system and quality of life for those in the corridor. Next slide. Our steering committee, as I mentioned earlier, is made up of the United States Forest Service, Tahoe Transportation District, and Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. Our consultant team that helped develop the plan is led by Design Workshop, transportation consulting firms LSC and Fair and Pierce, Orca, which is a visitor experience consulting firm that specializes in guestology and the science of visitors and moving them around, and then Karen Mullen, a local consultant. Next slide. But we're not doing it just alone. We have many, many partners and other stakeholders that are involved in this process. The logos on the right are just a few of the other agencies, businesses, and nonprofits that have participated on our project development team, meeting over 6 times during this process in order to provide input, feedback, and develop a plan that will be collectively implemented by the group. We also engaged with our stakeholders and included things like focus group surveys, workshops, and other outreach like this webinar. To date, and not including this webinar, we've done 15 days of data collection in the corridor. We've had dozens of meetings, lots of presentations. We did an online survey that had over 1,300 responses. We've done pre-COVID, we did 2 open houses. This is our second webinar, and there's over 950 people on our email list, and we've already received thousands of comments and questions from a variety of people within this corridor. So this has been a very involved process from the beginning. Next slide. And what did all this data collection and talking with stakeholders, what did it reveal? It really revealed these key issues. Demand for recreation in this corridor has exceeded the infrastructure, and it impacts transportation, the transportation system and visitor experience and the environment. You can see some of the other concerns there. Next slide. The vision. So what are we trying to accomplish? We really want to preserve this icon that is Emerald Bay, that is the West Shore, by increasing the number of travel choices and the different options for people to get there without needing to use their personal vehicles. Next slide. And it's really about trying to find this balance to be able to manage the corridor for environmental improvement, quality of life, and recreation access. When you look at State Route 28, you have the beach and you have the mountain and the narrow highway. This corridor, compared to that, has many more recreational activities. It has residents, it has seasonal homeowners. There's a lot more that's going on within this corridor and a lot more that it can offer. So it's really about finding that balance between the visitor experience, how you're operating the corridor, and then making sure you're protecting those natural and cultural resources. Next slide. But they're all interconnected. You can't just do one thing and expect major results or changes to happen. If you're going to have a successful transit program, it also has to be implemented with parking management and technology and other infrastructure improvements. All of these strategies are interconnected and give us the tools and the multi-benefit projects we need to achieve those goals of enhancing visitor experience, improving lake clarity and resource protection, and enhancing the safety for those in the corridor. Next slide. So what did our data tell us when we went out and did all this data collection? What are the people doing in this corridor? Where are they coming from? What are their travel patterns? And this is really key to developing a transit framework. The transit framework is how we're going to develop the system to move people around without their vehicles. So you can see again, within the corridor from Hope to Baldwin all the way up to Meeks Bay, there's a variety of different activities that people are doing. And even within Emerald Bay, for example, the variety of activities based on the parking lot would be, can vary greatly. All of these numbers are detailed more in the existing conditions report available on the 89 corridor plan website, which we'll display later on in the presentation. And then their travel pattern. I think the one that's circled is really that key hint that showed us that a transit package could work here. 75% of the people that visit Pope to Baldwin from South Shore return to the South Shore. The same as 60% for Emerald Bay. So there's a lot of people that are going to and then coming back from Emerald Bay or recreation destinations from South Shore to South Shore. The same is for North Shore to North Shore. You see the very low percentage of travel through traffic. People that are visiting and stopping at these recreation sites are typically coming and going back to the same place, which tells us that there's a high likelihood that those people would use transit because that's exactly the type of user transit serves. You also notice that there's extreme problems with roadside parking, as we all know, and parking lots filling up early. We've seen some success around the basin and in other locations where having smart parking and parking reservation systems has really helped alleviate those issues. Next slide. So building on this data, we needed to test different alternatives. We needed to test out different frameworks to see how feasible they were and how many people you could move around by different modes. So we tested 4 different frameworks. One, all the way to the left, is that auto dominant, which is your today's visitation. The vast majority of people arrive to this corridor via car. On the other side, we thought and our partners expressed interest in seeing what would it look like to envision a future where Emerald Bay and the corridor was car free, where all people that wanted to go and enjoy the recreation had to get there without their vehicle? What would that look like? And then 2 of those in between. The plan ahead visitor, where if you're the type of visitor that knows that they want to go to Emerald Bay, they can look it up ahead of time, get your reservation, get aligned, and get to your destination easier with or without your car. The savvy visitors, the type of visitor that knows or finds out on their trip to Tahoe that really it's going to be difficult to find a parking spot. So they're able to use the technology and signage that we install in the corridor in order to find a different way to get to that corridor. And then we've also evaluated a number of routes that connect both South Shore and North Shore to the corridor without needing your vehicle. Next slide. And now our consultant, Stephanie Grigsby, is going to go over the results of the alternatives analysis and talk more in detail about the recommendations.
Thanks, Devin. As Devin said, this is Stephanie Grigsby. I'm a consultant with Design Workshop, and just to give recognition to the rest of the team, as Devin said at the beginning of this presentation, Design Workshop was one of the consultants, along with a team of other consultants looking at different strategies and opportunities to think about how we can manage this corridor differently so that we can really achieve those goals of increased safety, better travel experience, and then also really trying to protect the lake and protect the environment, which is so precious to us all here in Tahoe. As Devin described in the previous slide, the range of alternatives that our travel consultant looked at ranged from a really car oriented destination versus a transit only. So just to orient you to these graphics, the blue line represents vehicle travel and the purple line represents visitors arriving via transit. So on the left, an auto-dominated alternative moving through a mixed alternatives to a transit only alternative. And what we really found as part of the analysis was the number of buses that it would take to be able to move the 2018 busy summer day, that a number of people that would visit the corridor on a busy summer day, the number of buses that it would take to be able to move people via a transit only alternative. If you look over at the right, you can see the 2035 projected visitation. It would take 38 buses running at one time with a total fleet of about 51 buses running every 3 to 7 minutes to be able to move that number of people through the corridor via just transit. So looking operationally wise and thinking about the budget that would accommodate that, it was really a little bit of a sobering exercise to understand that transit alone probably wouldn't be able to solve the issue and really wasn't a sustainable option moving forward. But looking at an option like the second one from the right, where we move about 45% of the people via car and about 50% via transit, that something like that could work, but just using transit alone still was pretty high operational costs and infrastructure costs just for the transit infrastructure. These numbers that are shown on this slide here don't take into account all of the other infrastructure costs that would be associated with implementing park and rides and some of the other facilities, but just as a broad brush, looking at the initial thoughts about what those costs would be, thinking that maybe we can shoot for sort of a mixed alternative where we have really utilize the parking areas that are in Emerald Bay and Pope Baldwin and within the corridor, but see how we can leverage transit as well. So we looked towards some of our additional examples of some of the best practices that have been used in other recreation areas to think about the other strategies that we could also use to really create success for the corridor. And one of those examples is Muir Woods. They implemented a reservation system and really have seen the ability to be able to change how people are accessing that recreation area and really trying to think about how we distribute the curve. So the previous analysis that I had shown on the previous page slide showed trying to have a bus system accommodate the current distribution pattern. So on this slide here, you can see the orange line represents the summer typical distribution where people begin arriving in the morning and you have this peak throughout the day. So from 11 to about 3 where people are really arriving in this peak time period. And what reservation system really allows you to do is to distribute that a little bit more throughout the day, knowing that we probably won't be able to, in the early morning and in the late evening, be able to distribute it evenly along that average. So that blue line would be an average of everybody coming throughout the day on a particular time, but that we would be able to really try and distribute it a little bit more. So within the next model that you'll see, trying to have a planning assumption of reducing 35% from the peak. And what they saw in Muir Woods, what they were actually able to achieve was about a 45% reduction of the peak. So again, this idea of being able to use transit, but using it with other strategies such as a reservation system, as well as congestion pricing and other parking management strategies throughout the corridors, being able to use those in tandem to be able to really build a system. And one of the interesting things about reservation systems too is that you're really able to create a framework for people to be able to arrive via transit, but you're also able to model that reservation system and really trying to make it equitable as well. So there's a lot of different options and opportunities that have been found through other recreation areas throughout the nation that we can really pull from to design a reservation system that can really work for Emerald Bay. So what we found as part of that idea of being able to use additional tools is to build a recommended travel framework that really allows for water transit, it allows for shuttle transit, and then implemented with a reservation system to be able to allow for almost 60% of the visitors to arrive to the corridor via transit or bike. So from water system to a park and ride shuttle system starting at the Y and then also at Sugar Pine Point State Park, that you'd be able to have 15-minute buses running throughout the corridor that would be able to, in the end, achieve a reduction of almost 37,500 cars fewer every summer month in the corridor. As part of this travel framework, one of the key opportunities and implementation pieces would be the completion of the Tahoe Trail. In the image at the right, that's represented by that dashed green line. So you can see where it completes from Meeks Bay down to Spring Creek. And then the purple dashed line is the general transit shuttle system along with the water shuttle system as well. So in all instances, through traffic would be allowed, but a key piece here is the relocation or restriction of roadside parking, and using enforcement, increased enforcement is really important here. One of the things that has been learned on the State Route 28 corridor is really the need for no parking zones. So throughout the corridor from Via Bliss down through Camp Richardson and Pope Beach, actually relocating that roadside parking and having those people come via transit and via bike or via water shuttle, and really helping to allow for a better flow of traffic through the corridor, but then also a much more manageable way for people to actually reach their recreation destinations. So as part of the corridor plan, we recognize that, as Devin had mentioned in the earlier slides, that there's this interconnected set of strategies that are all needing to be implemented in tandem with each other. And throughout the corridor, there's a suite of overall recommendations that are corridor-wide. The first of which is the completion of the Tahoe Trail, which I mentioned before. And this is really a landmark, I think, a wonderful opportunity for the corridor to really have another beautiful trail that's another recreation opportunity along the West Shore. The other recommendations are the transit and reservation system during the summer months and on peak weekends. By building the transit system, it allows for that system to potentially be used for other events and at peak periods. The relocation or restriction of roadside parking within the corridor, a recreation zone speed limit, which you'll see in future slides in just a minute. This is an idea in terms of, again, picking up for some of the things that they have learned in Nevada about being able to reduce the speed zone through some of the high recreation areas during the peak season and during the summer, or during peak winter days as well. There's a recommendation for point source congestion management, specifically at Pope Beach Road and Jamison Beach Road, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The need for winter and off-season access improvements. As many of you know, the corridor, I think, is really, in particular, one of the a key access point for backcountry access, not just in the summer, but also in the winter. So thinking about year-round recreation access and opportunities to be able to reach the backcountry in all seasons. In tandem with a number of the recommendations, that there's a need for technology infrastructure to be able to allow people to understand and get real-time updates about how they can access their recreation area, along with increased operational resources and coordinated management overall. So we recognized early along that the corridor really had some very particular areas that really functioned in and of themselves in a little bit different ways. So we had organized the corridor in 5 segments, as you can see on this map, and I'll talk through some of the particular recommendations by segment. So in the Pope to Baldwin segment, which goes from Westway to Baldwin Beach, one of the main things here is really trying to address the congestion, particularly the congestion that occurs around Pope Beach Road and then Jamison Beach Road. What we found through the data analysis is that a lot of the congestion at Pope Beach Road is really due to the traffic queuing on a summer day as people are reaching the beach. So management strategies such as reservations, thinking about relocating that kiosk further up to the north to the lakeside will help address that queuing along that section of the highway, and then allow for better access into the beach as well. Throughout this segment, we'd be relocating and restricting the roadside parking, connecting the parking areas. There's actually previously has environmental documentation project that is represented in this bold dashed black line along through the Tahoe Historic Site area, which would link up those parking areas and then allow people to navigate within those parking zones without having to come back to 89. Again, trying to reduce the number of cars along the highway. Thinking about parking management strategies at the beach, a park and ride bike lot where you could come and park and then get off and then jump on a bike trail, or to jump on a shuttle system to be able to reach Emerald Bay or to your other recreation areas. We're talking about expanding the pedestrian and bike facilities. The bike path through this segment is really highly used, and so opportunities to think about increasing that capacity either through a cycle track or through an expansion of biking facilities. And then within this zone, establishing the recreation speed limit. One of the particular areas that we looked at in this corridor was the Jamison Beach Road intersection, which many of you may know had a pedestrian hybrid signal that was installed a few years ago. As part of the project, we looked at what would happen in terms of traffic flow by holding pedestrians as they cross from the ice cream shop to the lakeside of this intersection, because that again causes this traffic queue. So the engineers looked at 30-second hold of the pedestrian traffic and found that when they held pedestrians to one side for 30 seconds, that traffic flow actually decreased by 5%. In comparison, when they held people for 60 seconds, they found that traffic flow actually increased by 8%. So things to think about as we're thinking about strategies for improving the congestion here. One of the other things that they looked at as part of this study was where people were coming to and going and where they were going as they were crossing the roadway here. And as part of that finding, they found that if we relocated the ice cream shop use and the mountainside shoulder parking associated with that use to the lakeside, that you could actually reduce 90% of the associated pedestrian crossings. So again, looking at ways to think about how we reduce the need for people to cross and being able to manage that congestion a little bit better in this area. So that has resulted in a suite of recommendations that are really about adaptive management. So again, thinking about not just one project that is done and gone, but thinking about, you know, when we recommend projects, actually monitoring those and using data to evaluate their effectiveness and how they need to be implemented in phases. So our first phase of strategies for the Jamison Beach Road intersection would be to first relocate this striped crosswalk that you see here to the western leg of the intersection. So that in effect would allow people exiting Jamison Beach Road to have a free left because they wouldn't be waiting for pedestrians to cross. And then restricting the roadside parking. Again, as we restrict that roadside parking in this zone, we'll improve the area traffic flow by changing behaviors. Currently, as the parking lot's filled, as people are reaching the beach, people begin to circulate and park along the highway, which in essence creates a parking lot along the roadway where people are looking for parking spaces and slowing and turning around. So by restricting that roadside parking, we've seen improvements in that traffic flow. The third phase of this strategy here at Jamison Beach Road would be to relocate those land uses that are on the mountainside, so the bike shop and the ice cream shop, to relocate those to the lake side, and then also relocating the bike path connection further to the north as well. Again, moving pedestrian uses so that people aren't crossing the road to reach lakeside or mountainside uses and then going back, especially the bike shop where the bike path is on the lakeside, and the bike rental shop makes sense to be associated with that as well. And then finally, monitoring those three strategies and seeing how they work, and then if needed in the future, looking at a signalized intersection, which could be a standard signal and not the pedestrian hybrid that's currently installed but not in use. As part of the suite of strategies and infrastructure projects that are recommended for the Emerald Bay segment, the first is the Tahoe Trail completion. First started by a feasibility study to look at trail alignments. The green dashed line that you see on this map is very conceptual in nature. It does not represent a preferred alignment. It represents just diagrammatically the idea of completing the Tahoe Trail. A full feasibility study and working with homeowners association groups and the stakeholders, state parks, Forest Service, Caltrans throughout this corridor would really be done in depth in the next phase to identify what the real suite of those realistic alternatives could be, and then evaluating those, developing a preferred recommendation, and then going through engineering. Key within this segment also is improving winter access. So that is both understanding and trying to provide open parking areas. So working with the Forest Service to strategically identify which parking areas need to be open to be able to have backcountry winter access in the winter. And then also looking at roadway design opportunities and management opportunities to improve year-round access. So it's not just about recreation access, but it's really also about emergency access for those emergency responders, but then also for evacuation needs as well. For as part in tandem with the transit access, as I mentioned before, there would be the restriction and relocation of roadside parking, the implementation of a reservation and transit system, along with congestion and dynamic pricing. We've also identified in need for some roadway improvements to be able to achieve that year-round access, along with being able to have places for transit to turn around. There's also a suite of opportunities for improved parking areas and connecting those parking areas with the Tahoe Trail or other off-highway pedestrian systems to be able to allow people to move from destination to destination within this area. And then finally, the Lake Multi-Use Trail, which is represented here in the dashed brown line, along with when we know that if we want to improve and provide for waterborne access, that we also need to improve the pier at Emerald Bay and then associated facilities with that, such as restroom facilities, and then operational improvements as well to be able to have staffing and facilities to be able to accommodate that use. Moving to the north, the main recommendation and infrastructure project that's recommended for access here is the completion of the Tahoe Trail. Again, similar to that graphic that I described for Emerald Bay, the green dashed line that you see on this map is diagrammatic. It does not represent a specific alignment. This is just identifying the desire to be able to complete the Tahoe Trail. And then also a thought that if the trail does need to cross the roadway, that it would do so in a grade separated manner. So it would do either an underpass or an overpass, similar to the SR28 trail, the East Shore Trail, to really, again, allow for reduced conflicts between cyclists and vehicles as well. Within this corridor, improving winter access specifically to the backcountry and to some of those areas. So identifying and understanding, this is again part of that adaptive management of identifying where those recreation areas are, where those emergency or where those access points are that need to be remain open in the winter so that we can pull people off of the road and be able to have a safe place for them to be. Along with improving emergency response infrastructure, technology infrastructure, and then the lake multi-use trail, which you can see in the dotted brown alignment as well. The next segment is the Meeks Bay segment to the north. Again, this segment would have the completion of the Tahoe Trail coordinated with the Meeks Bay Restoration Project, and then looking at pedestrian bike facilities. Within this zone, also thinking about the recreation speed limit. So similar to the Tahoe Meadows on the Nevada side near Mount Rose, where in the winter during heavy snow days when there's lots of use along the highway, reducing that speed limit so that people can access those recreation areas. And then particularly within this zone too, recognizing the Washoe tribe and their heritage and the important cultural destination here. And finally, the Sugar Pine Point segment to the north. This segment really served as a northern gateway to the West Shore. So an opportunity to establish that corridor gateway and to create a park and ride intercept lot where people would stop, get in a shuttle, and then be able to explore the remainder of the corridor without having to get outside of their car, that they would be able to jump on a bus or to access water transit to be able to explore the rest of the corridor during a summer day. Again, looking at emergency response infrastructure, so pull-off areas for be able to improve the emergency response areas, and then improving the pier at Sugar Pine Point as well to be able to allow for waterboard access. So that is a really quick high-level overview of the recommendations, both from the travel framework, how people might arrive via transit, via water shuttle, via the Tahoe Trail, and then some of the infrastructure elements that are actually needed to be incorporated alongside of those, that vision of multimodal access. So we were just wondering, as a quick poll, I'll turn it over to Devin to get your input on what you are most excited about in terms of some of the recommendations.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. I just opened the poll, so people, if they see that, can vote in that now. So we'll give that a minute. Okay, so it's looking like congestion management, Tahoe Trail, transit, parking, safety, winter access. A lot of comments about how it's hard to pick just one. We'll
totally agree.
And that's why all of our connections and everything is interconnected, because it's really hard to, you can't really do just one and get the results. They are really interconnected, but I think it helps us to see what people are interested in. So I'll close that poll and display the results for everyone. And then just as we move forward, there's some questions in the Q&A, which we'll get to in a second, but about what happens next and if there's a champion. So moving forward, the same partners and organizations and stakeholders and public that have been involved in the planning process to date will continue to be planned as we move forward. The plans and recommendations within this corridor plan are just that. They're recommendations, and they're a potential framework and a way to move forward. As we develop this plan and work with partners, some projects are going to be higher priority than others. Some have already, some of the projects identified are already existing and planned projects that have environmental analysis completed on them. Some of them will need to be completely designed, and a lot more input will need to go into those. But overall, this sets that framework, and this corridor management team and all of the stakeholders and partners will continue to be involved in that process as we move forward. With the nature of corridor planning, nothing will get implemented without that partnership. So that's how we'll be moving forward. Next slide. And then just as a bigger connection, the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency is also in the process of updating our regional transportation plan. This plan outlines the overall transportation vision for the entire region, the programs, policies, projects, and this corridor plan is part of that. As you can see in the green communities bucket, that's where the corridor plans live. And this corridor plan takes the vision, policies, and goals of the regional plan and packages those projects and recommendations and helps to accelerate that implementation. So the recommendations from this corridor plan will be rolled up and moved into the regional transportation plan. And there will be opportunities for the public to get more information about that actually right now online at trpa.org/RTP, but coming up in the future as well. The draft corridor plan, which we presented today, is available online, trpa.org/SR-89. We are going to be doing a series of presentations to our partner agencies, boards over the next several months to make sure that everyone has a chance to provide input and feedback. In addition to this webinar, we'll be sending out a survey afterwards with some more detailed questions. So we would appreciate anyone that listened to this webinar to listen to that. We've got a final public webinar Tuesday, September 22nd. This is where we'll talk about all the things that we heard from all of the public, how we incorporated that feedback, and what the next steps are. If you are part of a homeowners association, a board, a nonprofit, a group, a business that operates or is located within the plan boundaries, please reach out to me at dmiddlebrook@trpa.org to set up a presentation and learn more, and we can have more discussions. So we want to get as much feedback as possible. The final corridor plan will be available the week of September 14th through 18th. And if you have any additional comments, questions, anything else that you want to submit, you can always email me at dmiddlebrook@trpa.org, and that information's on the plan website. So with that, Stephanie, we do have quite a few questions that have come in, so I will start working down the road, and we can kind of tag team and trade off on these.
Sounds good. Sure.
Let's start with this one. This one is about the unsafe parking situation in Emerald Bay, and what are the recommendations within the corridor plan that'll help improve parking safety?
So the first piece of that, and I think this goes to Devin's comment about how all of these are really interconnected, is to be able to restrict that roadside parking. Again, what the finding is that as parking areas fill, then people still want to find access. So then they start treating the highway as a parking lot, start turning around in the middle of the road, and really not navigating it in the safest way. That comes with a suite of really strategies. We found, again, from the 28th corridor and then from other recreation areas that are seeing similar issues, that the need to do multiple things. So when you have sort of carrots and sticks. So one is the stick to say we're going to restrict that roadside parking and create enforcement strategies and other infrastructure pieces that help to enforce that those no parking zones, such as increasing fines, being able to have barriers, improved operations budgets, to be able to have technology help with some of the enforcement pieces, but then providing another alternative, right? You need to be able to have system where people can be able to get the access that they want, but doing it in a much more safe way. So being able to provide a transit system that has enough frequency built in, that it's a desirable alternative that you can actually start to shift behavior. And that's what we've seen in other areas as well, that you build it, and it's part of a marketing system. That's where the technology comes in, that you actually improve and change people's behavior over time and be able to influence that shift. And then we have the opportunities to think about, other ways that we can improve the safety, so that we can have, areas for people to be able to pull over to allow emergency vehicles to pass, that we have reduced congestion, which again reduces that delay time, allowing for emergency vehicles to come through and then for evacuation to actually occur, which I think are things that we're all thinking about, and ways to be able to have multiple benefits, not just for the recreation access, but actually to be able to improve the safety as well.
Great. And then along the same lines of that with parking, how will the parking restrictions and the new parking impact off-season, shoulder season, and winter access and parking?
So we are looking, the Forest Service is actually looking at opportunities to keep some of the parking lots open. Again, that comes with an operational cost, because we need to be able to have trash collected and other things, some of the lots being plowed as well. So identifying which of the lots should be open, and then making sure that we can find ways to do that. We're also looking at ways, what that demand is. So in Emerald Bay in particular, there's quite a demand, especially I think as, snow levels are a little bit higher over time, that we're seeing even high demand just for people to go and take a picture in the winter to access Emerald Bay. So providing and understanding, that's part of that adaptive management of, how many people are actually using Emerald Bay for backcountry access, and making sure that we have facilities open there, but how many are trying to access it just to take a picture and for that day use, quick access, and then making sure we have the off-highway parking available, and then building a system that might be actually used on peak weekends as well. We've seen that in other recreation areas, that if you have the system built and that framework, that you actually have then the ability to be able to use it on the peak days in the winter and the off season too.
Yeah, and I know with the parking restrictions, we've talked a lot about using physical barriers to stop people from parking in areas. And that's one thing that's also a possibility, is if there is just along the highway a roadside pullout that's used in the off season or winter for parking, that could have bollards go up in the summer to prevent parking when you don't want it. A question about the potential proposed pier at Sugar Pine State Park. Would that also be configured for public safety benefits?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great point, that in all instances, as we're doing these improvements, trying to make sure that they're multi-benefit, not just for transit, but for emergency access for people, emergency responders to get onto the water and then off the water as well. We also looked, building off of that question, we also looked at access for helipads and how people might need to access the corridor that way. So as Devin had mentioned, our stakeholder group involved not just the agencies that have lands in the corridor, but also those who are called upon to operate and manage the corridor, specifically our emergency responders, and got input from them about how they use it, and then what some of the opportunities were there as well.
Great. And then a question about ticketing. The question is, why aren't people ticketed along the roadside over the white line? But I think maybe if you could address the low cost of tickets and their ineffectiveness at this point, that'd be good.
Yeah, that's a good point. And again, I think that's one of the things that we found on the 28 corridor is the need. In California, the ticket price is actually fairly low in terms of parking people or ticketing people who are parked illegally or incorrectly along the corridor. So in Nevada, the process was to actually be able to increase the fine to an extent that it changed behavior. So that the fine in Nevada, Devin, you might have to correct me, but I think it's about $350. It's more like, it's very particular, like $327.
Yeah, they just doubled it to $700.
And now they just doubled it to 700. So there's a tipping point where people say, oh, I'm going to actually change my behavior because the ticket price is such that it actually encourages me to have a different behavior versus just wanting to pay the fine. In terms of talking with CHP and the sheriff, there's instances where they would tow somebody and somebody would just be ready to pull right in after them. We recognize that these are really challenging issues that will, again, require the management team to potentially address it at a higher level than this management team could, that it needs to go to some legislative changes to be able to increase that ticket price. So there's a little bit of both, from increasing the pricing to, as Devin said, creating other infrastructure opportunities to really change that behavior for barriers, or to be able to use different techniques to do the enforcement.
Yeah, there's questions about the transit routes. How will the north route and the south route interact, and where will those transfer points be?
So the final transit design will likely evolve throughout the process. We've set forward a framework to understand what that ridership would be and how that marries up with recreation access and capacity and those questions. But at a high level, we would imagine we were able to design the transit system though, so it would run at 15-minute intervals starting from Sugar Pine Point State Park, and then also at 15-minute intervals starting at the Y. And really the transit point would be at Emerald Bay, that you would come from the north to Emerald Bay, potentially through Emerald Bay, so Inspiration Point, do a turnaround at Bayview, and then go back to the north. You would transfer at that point. Emerald Bay would be a beautiful place to have a transit layover. If you wanted to continue to go south to Pope Beach, or to connect all the way down through to the Y. And then similarly from north, you would start at the Y or Westway, and then come up through Emerald Bay, Inspiration Point, do a transfer again at Viking Tome, and then continue north if you wanted to continue north, or do a turnaround. But as I said, as the system gets fine-tuned, that could change, that you actually have a full system that goes from the north parking lot all the way to the south parking lot and back and forth. As the system, again, is really dialed in, those frequencies and changes would be developed at that point too.
And then how is wildfire emergency and emergency response and evacuation being thought about in terms of this plan, and what implications it could have?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is really thinking about the improvements for the congestion management as part of the data collection that we were doing in 2018, and then looking at some of the data points that have been developed over the years. Just the delays that are caused by the congestion through the corridor, being able to have better traffic flow so people aren't coming in and out, and being able to have a free flow of traffic for emergency responders to make it through the corridor was really important, along with being able to find opportunities for emergency pullovers. So, as emergency responders need to make it through the corridor, being able to have those pull-off zones for people to pull over and be able to let emergency vehicles through. We're also looking, as part of working with the Forest Service and the Lake Tahoe West project, looking at opportunities for even improvements to the roadsides for the management for wildfire as well.
And then can you talk about how the transit model relates to the 2018 peak day, and how we're thinking about growth?
Yeah, so when we did the initial analysis, we looked at the 2018 number in terms of, on a busy summer day, how many people were reaching the corridor, and using that sort of as a baseline, as an understanding of that level of people, that number of people, and then understanding what it might grow from there. What we found was that instead of trying to determine what the growth would be, we looked at what the transit model could accommodate before we sort of tip over and either need to provide more buses, or we need to think about something else in terms of how the model is developed. And what we found was that using that 2018 number as sort of a guidepost, that we could increase about 5% in visitation capacity before we would need to add either more capacity to the buses or do something else in terms of being able to accommodate access. But I think one of the key points to really consider as part of the travel framework is that it really provides you the tools to be able to, again, understand that sort of triangle that Devin talked about at the beginning, that balance between protecting the natural resources and the cultural resources, thinking about what the desired experience is. Some people want to experience a really remote sort of personal type of recreation experience, and others want a very developed experience. And then also what you actually have in terms of operational budgets, infrastructure capacity. So being able to have a transit framework per se that is able to be either dialed up a little bit, so we might be able to increase by 5%, or that we actually say, you know what, we're having too much impact still on our natural and cultural resources, and we need to dial down the visitation a little bit. But by having a system that we can manage, we can adjust that a little bit more and be able to have the opportunity to adaptively manage and have the tools to be able to do that management. And then as additional, if visitation does continue to grow, the plan does acknowledge that that is one of the questions that needs to be continued to be discussed at a regional level in terms of regional recreation capacity. Are there other areas within the basin that need to be improved to be able to accommodate visitation, and where are they going throughout the lake and not just this corridor as a whole? Because there's some big questions that we all need to think about as a collaborative group.
There's a couple questions about overpass or underpass at Jameson Beach Road for the pedestrians. Can you just touch on why that we did not go with that recommendation?
Yeah, we did look at that early along, and some of the things that we found for overpasses, and my friend Karen Mullen really likes to say that people are like water. We will just take the easiest path. And some of the things that we found is that we can build overpasses, but people don't use them unless you're forced to use it. So the process of having to travel up, walk up an overpass and then over and then walk back down, studies just show that people will just still dart across even really high traffic roads rather than taking an overpass. The pedestrian underpass that's on the East Shore is part of that, sort of experience that drops you down. So it's a really bikeable, it feels like that's the way you're supposed to go, and it's not something additional. And so those are a little bit more successful. So the infrastructure that would be needed and then the fencing required to force people either under or over just doesn't really lend itself to being, to seeing the success that we would have by just relocating those land uses to the side of the road that people are on. So instead of having to separate them and forcing people to cross to, get from the bike rental shop to the bike path, if you locate those on one side together, we would have higher success than creating an overpass or an underpass at that location.
There's a question, what is the lake trail as opposed to the Tahoe trail or the Tahoe rim trail? And the lake trail is an envisioned circumnavigation of the lake that is single track, so you can mountain bike on it. Currently, there's no way to mountain bike around the lake without going on roadways. In the West Shore, there's a big gap in connectivity for mountain bikers from south to north, so that is looking to fill that gap. And then what does the process of approval look like to, going back to those increased tickets, what do we have to do to increase the ticket fine in California?
So the increase in ticket, I might lean on you a little bit, Devin, as well, but it's part of the, it will require a change to the vehicle code and some of the legislative pieces that are associated with that. So that's part of, we identified a number of different items that will require an executive team to be able to move it forward at a little bit of a higher political level. And that was one of them in terms of being able to work through that process of increasing the ticket price. For example, on the 28 corridor side, that process involved going out with Nevada Highway Patrol, and it actually went out with the judge too, to look at the signage, to look at where people were parked, and then be able to say what the signage should look like, where signs should be located, and then pricing it so that that the judge was willing to be able to enforce the ticket.
Great, thanks. Next question, what is involved in congestion pricing?
So congestion pricing, again, this is part of the fine tuning of the system. Congestion pricing, along with, it's a parking management strategy to understand, how you might shift demand. So the example that I had shown for Griffith Observatory, within that system, they still had some of the parking areas right at the observatory open for use. People could drive to that location and be able to park, get out and take their pictures at the observatory. And that price was like $10 a parking spot on the peak time. So that slide that I showed that had the little bell chart where the everybody wants to arrive from 10 to 3 on a 4th of July day, that's your peak of peaks. So that peak time at that peak day is going to be priced a little bit higher than an off, a Wednesday at 8 o'clock per se. So your pricing is varied depending on how it aligns with the peak time and that peak day. And that helps to shift the demand to some of the off-peak times, and then it helps to distribute a little bit more through the day. And what they found in the Griffith Park Observatory example was that by being able to use that strategy of being able to have congestion pricing on some of the, really, primo parking spots, that then funds the transit system, it funds a free transit system, it funds the infrastructure improvements and the operation improvements for the entire park. So being able to do it in a balanced way, because we don't want to, just overprice things, but being able to look at, how you can shift user behavior by thinking about just shifting that demand a little bit throughout the day.
What's the current thought on where park and ride lots in South Shore might be located?
So, there's a lot of study that needs to be done to look at those park and ride lots on the Y area. Ideally, it would be located in that zone. The reason the Y makes sense is because then you have a shorter run. So you have fewer buses that are needed to be able to make that 15-minute trip up to Emerald Bay and be able to return. But it also allows you to tie into the rest of the transit system and the transit network in Tahoe. So you could have a park lunch strategy where somebody, which means that if I'm coming from State Line, I'm staying at the casinos, I can hop on a shuttle that will take me to the Y, I jump on that bus, and that takes me to Emerald Bay. So you're tying into this overall transit network. We're looking at what lands are available there for parking areas, but that will be a further study.
Do the plans include additional trash cans, trash removal, and messaging to help people recreate responsibly?
We do talk about the need for those other facilities, but I think that's a great comment for us to make sure that we address as well. I think we all see those needs. It's not just parking, but what are the support facilities that are needed as well? Great comment.
If the campground spots at Bayview may get removed, what would happen to those? What would happen to the parking available to day hikers and hikers that want to go into Desolation Wilderness?
So that would all be addressed through the overall parking strategy. So again, tying the backcountry access in with the transit system, but then also, they could, as part of the reservation system, reserve a parking space as well. So the backcountry access in the peak summertime would be primarily through the transit and reservation system.
I know you mentioned the Jameson Beach Road improvements, but are there other improvements in that corridor for congestion, such as like Hope Beach?
Yeah. So definitely at Pope Beach, the reservation system, trying to get people into the Pope Beach area in a different way is one thing. So, the reservation helps to distribute that demand. And it also lets people know that you're not just going to sit along the highway. If you don't have a reservation, you're not going to be able to get in. But then we start small. So we start by moving the kiosk to further north towards the beach. So that increases that stacking zone. So people are stacking along Pope Beach Road instead of along the highway. Improving the bike path. So actually creating a separated shared use path from the highway to Pope Beach as well. And then looking at, again, sort of those parking management strategies as well. A turnaround queue, if we move the kiosk up, being able to allow for people to, come into that beach area, recreation area without, queuing up along the beach itself, along the highway itself.
Could you provide a little more detail on what types of technology we're proposing to use in the corridor?
So, it starts with the base of just improving where we can the fiber areas. Some places that will be really challenging. So where we can think about cellular as well. That's another study that is being looked at in terms of really diving into the infrastructure for technology improvements throughout that corridor. And then there's a lot of different technology systems in terms of, what they call ITS, intelligent transportation systems, where you have the sign along the side of the road that says, parking's full, use the shuttle. They use that over on the East Shore as well to notify people before they've reached the corridor. You see them in Tahoe with the brown overhead signs that tell you when chain controls are up or when there's something that you need to know along the corridor. So using that type of technology systems to apps so that you having a basin app that allows you to understand, here's my recreation areas and here's how I can access them via transits. And sort of that one-stop shop of, how do I access, how do I get on a bus and make my reservation from one place to another? And when the bus is coming, really that interactive dialogue from, being able to use technology to interact with visitors, along with technology systems to, again, allow for enforcement agencies to be able to have a few more tools to enforce no parking areas.
Will there be any short-term parking areas for quick photos while you're driving through the corridor?
The challenge is that, the parking areas, so say Vikings Home Inspiration would still be functioning, and those in essence would be your short-term parking stops. That would be trying to turn over for a quick take a picture and then keep moving on. We want to try and be as very clear in terms of being able to have a very consistent strategy for people being able to pull over. So, if we allow it in one place, we need to really recognize that would create confusion about where you might be able to do that. So really the idea is to, especially within Emerald Bay, is to be fairly straightforward that you can park at those designated off-highway parking lots during the summer. And then we have one viewpoint area that you'll be able to park at for that short term, take a picture and move on, but not allowing that informally during the summer because it, again, creates that confusion of where maybe I can just pull over in this one spot. And then you have multiple people trying to do that all along the corridor, and that would create confusion and not the clarity that you want in the system.
Let's see, just going through, I'm trying, if you are not having your exact question read, I am seeing them, but there's multiple questions that are around the same, so I have been combining several. Could you touch a little bit on what we need to do or look at for avalanche control through Emerald Bay to mitigate winter road closures?
Yeah, so that's anticipated to be, you know, an in-depth study as well in terms of thinking about what those, you know, road changes could be. We looked at, you know, some of the taken away from the avalanche control, but thinking about that other roadside year-round access. But there's a last switchback as you're coming to Emerald Bay. There's a, you know, really narrow corridor as you're coming through, you know, in terms of right along the ridgeback. Looking at opportunities to have some roadway design elements there. And then looking at the avalanche controls would be a further engineering study to look at, you know, are there other strategies that have been used in other high snow areas that have similar geologic formations to be able to control the avalanches a little bit more.
Great. And then can you talk a little bit, since we're in Emerald Bay, a little bit how tour companies or private charter buses would be able to contribute to reducing vehicle travels, or how they'll be able to interact in that corridor in the future?
Yeah, as part of that, it would be making sure that the system is designed to understand, you know, what that capacity would be, but then also having a few standards for the tour buses as well. So they park in designated areas, have certain turnover as well. So as part of the system, they would be designed as part of the overall transit approach. But again, making sure that that was managed and not just an add-on as well.
Thanks. And then can you talk about a little bit about the phasing of the plan or the proposed phases?
Yeah, so we've identified 3 main phases that are associated with that transit framework. So the first phase really builds from what resources we have and how we can leverage some of those resources. So looking at sort of building people's recognition that we need to start somewhere. So starting a small transit operation that operates a really short run. There's you know, some underutilized parking areas actually within the corridor. Believe it or not, the snow park is one of those. So being able to utilize some of the unused parking area there to be able to create a short transit run up to Emerald Bay and back. As part of that would be improvement of the Vikings Home parking lot, and then also transit stops throughout the corridor, and start within that zone, really looking at how we can restrict and relocate the roadside parking within this focused piece to create that transit function from, you know, this short run element, and build that, you know, habit of people being able to understand, oh, I need to start changing my behavior if I'm going to want to go to Emerald Bay. From there, the transit system builds as we begin to build, pull that park and ride system further to the south and then further to the north. So the second phase of the transit piece would be, that we're looking at, would be a park and ride at the Y area or West Way, and then also on the north side, with higher frequency from the south first. So, you know, 15-minute frequency from the south, the 30-minute frequency from the north, and that's really based on the usage numbers in terms of where the most volume is coming from, and then building that capacity out a little bit more to increase the frequency and increase water transit. Associated with that, in terms of phase 1 for the Tahoe Trail, would be the first phase is the development of a feasibility study. So actually identifying, you know, what is the preferred alignment, doing the environmental documentation on that preferred alignment, and then the multiple phases, the next phases for the Tahoe Trail will be to build trail connections to Emerald Bay and then around Emerald Bay. So phase 2 of the Tahoe Trail would be to from Meeks Bay to Emerald Bay, and from Spring Creek to Emerald Bay. And then the third phase will be what we see as a more challenging section to build it around Emerald Bay.
And then you mentioned the water transit. Can you talk a little bit more how a private-public partnership would help operate the water transit component?
Sure, and I might.
Yeah, if you want me to answer that one.
Yeah, or if Michelle's on, that might be a good one for Michelle to speak to.
Sorry about that. I was trying to have a little bit of lunch at the same time. I was
right at the right time.
Yes, I was just reading that actually in the Q&A, and I'm excited. I mean, I don't know if people realize this, but there's actually a water taxi today on the South Shore. And so what we were thinking for this plan that could be super useful is an expansion of that private service. So that does mean, that it is a paid service. So as far as the question goes about who's paying, the taxpayer, whatnot, we want to encourage, as Stephanie keeps mentioning, all these different alternatives. And so really, I think what the idea would be is just to offer, expand the route that exists today and do the same actually for the future on the North Shore. I hope that answers it. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, no,
Off guard
and
there.
No,
I would
that's
just
great.
say that the Camp Richardson and then also Homewood has expressed interest in operating that. And then Stephanie, maybe touch a little bit on a couple of questions. We've been talking a lot about visitors and recreation, but how are the needs and the needs of the homeowners throughout that corridor being addressed, that quality of life piece?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of this is just the congestion management. We heard from a number of homeowners in the area in terms of, on a summer day, how am I supposed to be able to get around? So being able to, provide a much more expected, clear anticipation of being able to have managed traffic flow and have know that you can actually make it through the corridor and not have just the unmanaged chaos that can occur in Tahoe on these busy summer days. So that's definitely one opportunity, along with, looking at opportunities to, the Tahoe Trail of being able to say, hey, can you actually access a shared use path from, relatively close to your home to be able to, jump on a trail and access recreation areas within your neighborhoods as well.
And then can you talk, there's a couple questions in here, a little bit just more about the visitor management side of things, wayfinding, public information. How does creating those gateways, like I know we've identified a couple areas of gateways, how do those gateways set this corridor apart?
Yeah, so that's one of the areas that are one of the other consultants on our team, Orca, who they are actually a group of visitor experience specialists from Disney that have utilized the lessons and the techniques that they had learned from visitor experience in Disney and have really been using it and helping guide national parks think about the visitor experience, and they set it apart in 5 different stages. And one of those stages is anticipation as you're doing your trip planning, but one is also the sense of arrival. When do you know that you've actually arrived to an area? So the corridor gateways are part of that. Really, I've arrived to someplace. I need to start thinking and behaving in a way that's appropriate for this special place that I've arrived to. And so we see those recreation gateways as part of that visitor experience, those stages of building different behavior and building the recognition that within this zone I'm going to start thinking about the fact that this is a special place. And then it ties again with some of the other opportunities. We've seen recreation areas tie that with sort of that ITS piece, so that within the signage you have interactive signage, so you can see, this is how I access transit. This is the fact that all the parking lots are full and I need to have started somewhere else and get on a bus. So there's lots of ways that the wayfinding, both outside of the corridor and then also within the corridor, really can create a unified sense of place to again help people change that behavior.
Yeah, and then I do see a couple questions in here about funding. I'll just address that. The corridor plan itself that we've released was funded through Caltrans SB1 grant funding, and then moving forward, a variety of funding sources from federal, state, and local sources will be pursued in order to implement this. We're also looking at some innovative funding structures, such as a pay for success model, which looks at how can we get private capital to pay for public improvements, but programs like the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act, Federal Lands Access Program, Prop 68 in California, there's a variety of funding sources that will be identified and pursued throughout this corridor.
I did see one question that asked about the parking lots at Pope and Camp Ridge, and I do want to clarify there would be there's no recommendation, especially within that area, that those parking areas would be closed. It would really be that roadside parking that would be restricted, and that visitation use would be asked to arrive via transit. But those parking areas that really serve a lot of visitors within that zone would be anticipated to remain open.
Yeah, and I would say there's also opportunity to have an internal loop created where people that move between each of the individual beaches and sites don't need to turn back on and off the highway each time. And then I do see a question about utilizing the high school parking lots during the summer as a base for transit. We have talked about utilizing existing parking lots as much as possible where we can. The high school has been brought up. One of the challenges with the high school is not given COVID, but usually the high school now that they start before Labor Day weekend, that definitely poses a challenge that we would not be able to, I guess that is on the weekend. School's not in session, but once school gets back in session, the ability to use that goes away. We've also identified, the airport in South Lake Tahoe is another parking lot that's underutilized that could be a potential location. So as much as we can prevent doing any new development and use existing lots, that's what we can do. And the initial pilot project for transit to Emerald Bay utilizes the existing snow park at Taylor Creek parking lot. So trying to do that as much as possible. But with that, let's see, one more question came in. I think this about cars parking in the bike lane on Highway 89. There was a couple other questions about enforcement. We talked about the ticket pricing, but how are we planning on doing more active enforcement in the corridor?
Yeah, that goes to the operational piece and funding of looking at how we can provide the resources for people to be able to do the enforcement. So that will be part of the additional conversations as part of the corridor management team to think about what those needs are, and especially by building new resources such as the barriers along the highway, to be able to then see what we also need in terms of the enforcement piece as well.
Yeah, and I think another question came in about physically blocking off problem areas. I think, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Physical barriers are something that's going to be needed. And then for people there's a lot of questions about the Tahoe Trail and the alignment and where the crossings aren't. I would just say again, for the purpose of this corridor plan, those maps and those potential alignments are still extremely conceptual. They follow some guided principles, including respecting private property and having the privacy there, trying to locate it as much as possible on public lands or in the Caltrans highway right away, and a number of other factors. The feasibility study for that project will be starting later this year, and there'll be many, many more opportunities as we go through that process for those people in the corridor or potential users of the trail to have more involvement and more input on how that trail alignment gets selected based on a number of factors. But we are out of questions. Again, if we missed yours, I might have combined it with another question that was similar. I have this question and answer log. The corridor plan will be working on getting more stakeholder input over the next 4 to 5 weeks, and then coming out with the final recommendations and final plan in September. And look forward to engaging with more people on this call. And again, if you want to learn more, read the plan. It's trpa.org/SR-89. And you can email me any additional comments, questions to dmiddlebrook@trpa.org. And my email's on that website. But thank you all for tuning in and have a wonderful afternoon. We will be sending out slides and recording of this afterwards along with a short survey.